There was a troubling incident this week in Turkiye. Bearing in mind, I'm going to be trying to keep up with the new name in this video rather than Turkey, its former name. Um, Simply for that seems to be the official name now, so I'm going to try to stick with that. Um, it's not a major story. I mean, it's not making headlines in the UK, but it's one of those stories that's kind of making a lot of, if you go online, there's quite a lot of coverage of it. It's a troubling incident. Basically, there was two American Marines. Their ship was docked in Izmir, Turkey's third city, and they were attacked by a nationalist mob. There's no other way to describe it. 15 people, 13 men, 2 women, surrounded these men, and they jostled them. They pushed them roughly. One of them had a bag put over his head, and you could see these guys shouting out for help, basically. My understanding was there was 5 other Marines that intervened. Obviously, the situation de-escalated. The 2 Marines involved were treated in hospital as a precaution, and the group was arrested, I'm pleased to say. So that's something. At least it didn't go by without, they just got away with it. But it's a troubling incident, not least because Turkey is a NATO country. And this, I think, highlights some of the sentiments behind the scenes, perhaps. Now, a caveat before I continue. Turkey is a country of about 85 million people. It would be wrong to attack the whole country and all Turkish people because of the actions of a small group of extremists, extreme nationalists. Nevertheless, I don't think it's entirely marginal. I do think there is, from what I've seen, I do think there is an ultranationalism in Turkish society. This is a country where, offending Turkishness is a criminal offence. I compare it to some other parts of the world, China, a few others, where ultranationalism is really intense. That's what I noticed with this as an outsider. I was in Turkey back in 1999, briefly, in the port of Marmaris. We had a good time there. I don't remember it very well. I was only 13 at the time. But, Turkey, it's one of the most visited countries in the world. I think Antalya ranks among one of the most visited cities because of it's an entrance port to Turkey. Turkey is a country rich in culture, lots of ancient sites, very ancient sites, some of the oldest in the world. It's cradled between 2 continents, 2 cultures. It's a very interesting country. But I do think the optics of this are not good. Now, a few things to say about the incident itself. The 2 men involved were, I think, very professional. They could have lashed back, they could have hit back, but they didn't. Presumably, well, they were outnumbered, but also I assume they were trained, if this sort of thing happens, don't escalate it. Just call for help, don't fight back. A lot of idiots were saying things on like that, oh, I thought they were Marines, they're supposed to fight back. Well, okay, it doesn't matter how tough you are. Let's say they fought back and they could even probably take out a few of these guys. What's them to stop an infuriated bigger mob coming in and, goodness knows what would happen in that situation. So I suspect they've probably been trained if this sort of thing happens. Don't escalate it, just defend yourself where possible, call out for help. And obviously that did happen. 5 other Marines, you couldn't see it in the footage that was available, but apparently they intervened. The 2 men were brought to hospital as a precaution. The good news was there was no serious injuries. Nevertheless, it would be an unpleasant experience for anyone. Now, I know that they're trained to be tough. We hear all the stuff about nothing like a US Marine. So they'll be trained to be tough. They'll be trained to face, battlefield situations. But nevertheless, this wasn't a battlefield. This isn't supposedly a friendly country, another NATO country. And they're just relaxing. I suspect they were off duty. They were in civilian clothes. I suspect they were just having a coffee or a drink, minding their own business. How did the mob know they were Americans? I guess they were talking. But how did they know they weren't just tourists? There must have been something that the mob had some information that they knew they were Marines. The ostensible reason for this was America's support for Israel. The ship was there ostensibly to bring supplies to Israel. I understand the strength of feelings with that, but what I would say to any Turks wanting to defend this is the optics of it are bad. A lot of American tourists are now going to be thinking, is Turkey a safe country to go to? Not just Americans, Westerners in general will think, well, this is the hostility towards Westerners. Um, Whatever the rights and wrongs of foreign policy, you can condemn America for its bias to Israel, but the optics of this are just bad. These men were not armed. They weren't there to cause trouble. They were minding their own business. It's ugly and it's cowardly. It's cowardly for a group to attack two individuals. How about fighting one on one? It's pure. I think that's frankly disgusting. I would say that in any context. I mean, imagine if this was an equivalent situation. Let's say with some joint military exercise, and there was a Turkish naval ship docked in an American port, and let's say some Turkish personnel got off, and let's say at the time there was some anger about Turkey in the United States for some policy issue, or let's say, for example, there was an Islamist attack. Turkey is a predominantly Muslim country. Let's just say an American nationalist group, which exists, they were to attack Turkish personnel. I think Turkiye would be in absolute uproar. American flags would be burned. The American ambassador would be kicked out. It would be, I guarantee, it would be an absolute uproar. As it stands, the Pentagon spokesman, a major general, can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he said it was a troubling incident. He emphasized that the Marines are okay. Um, I'd like to hear something from the Turkish government, like a formal condemnation of what this mob done to these men. If Erdogan's government cannot do that, it raises serious questions about what direction Turkey is going in. Turkey is going in. I mean, is this how Turkey treats NATO allies? How would Turkish military personnel, or how would Turkish nationals feel if Turkish military personnel were attacked in Germany or Britain or America? Um, I think there's obvious double standards there. There's another thing. They have a Facebook group, and the report suggested that they were taken into custody. That's something better than nothing. Held for 4 hours. Now, whether that was just they were taken into custody for optics, for the cameras, oh look, we're not letting them do this, but then they just get away with it scot free. In the United States and Britain and Germany, violent, unprovoked assault is a serious offence. So if this gives the impression that in Turkey, basically you can have a mob attacking people and get away with it, that's a very bad image. Bear in mind, after the devastating earthquake last year that hit Turkey and Syria, 60,000 people dead, the United States, among other countries, was very generous in aid packages. Now, I'm not saying that that's wrong. I think it's right that the international community comes together in a humanitarian crisis. But these ultranationalists basically want all American influence gone. And, maybe they should be careful what they wish for, because, for one thing, if Turkey keeps regressing backwards in an Islamist path, which is what Erdogan wants, look at Iran. Look at Iran over the last 40 years. Clearly, it hasn't been good for Iran. And I have to say, all this rhetoric about American imperialism, well, they're Turkish nationalists. Maybe it's time they were honest about Turkey's record, historically speaking. I'll say Turkey in that context, to use the old term. I mean, this is a country that still doesn't acknowledge the Armenian and Greek genocides and the Syrian genocide of the early 20th century, even though 34 countries, and the academic consensus is now that that was by definition a genocide. Erdogan at UN level, along with Pakistan's Imran Khan and Malaysia's Mahathir Mohamad, tried to force Western countries to be subject to de facto blasphemy laws. Emmanuel Macron, to his credit, pushed back on that. Other Western leaders less so. I can't see Keir Starmer doing that. It's one area I'm disappointed with Starmer on. I'd like to see him be a lot more robust in standing up to Islamists at a global level. Turkey is a middle power. It's a large military. On one hand, it's a country that is very important in NATO. Strategically, it's straddled between two continents. It's it's part European, it's part Middle Eastern, it's part Near East. It's a real influx of those geopolitical straddling points. So it's a very important country. I remember in 2015 when a Russian plane was shot down over Turkey. Turkey and Russia have a complex and sometimes difficult history. That could have been a very serious situation. It de-escalated. Ankara and Moscow managed to de-escalate that, but I don't think this thing will escalate further. But it's just a sign that this ultra-nationalism in Turkey is it's clearly very anti-West, and that raises questions about Turkey's status as a NATO country. Not without coincidence, I would say this week Ankara has been pushing towards trying to get membership of the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. I don't know if they call it the BRICS or what. But I would say Turkey is one of those countries. I mean, from a British perspective, we should treat with some degree of caution, a bit like India, neither a friend or an enemy, I would say, um, but geopolitically important. The West maybe shouldn't necessarily hope for Turkey to leave NATO because there is strategic importance there. Nevertheless, we can't have this situation where Turkey can just do its own thing as a member of NATO. I mean, I'd like to see Erdogan on unconditionally condemning what happened. If he can't do that, you know, why should America not, for example, recall the Turkish ambassador? After